Scott Burnside, ESPN.com, alongside Frank Provenzano. Am I saying that right? Provenzano. Yeah.
Good Italian name.
I like that. Good Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario boy. Longtime NHL executive, 17 years, 3 different teams. I'm going to say that every time we do the video now so people will remember that. And welcome to our trade deadline coverage team.
Thank you.
It's been a really interesting time as we head into looking ahead to Monday afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern, of course. A lot of activity has taken place beforehand. In general, are you surprised that we've seen the kind of activity, and whether it's David Clarkson, we saw Evander Kane go some time ago, just before we came down to sit down here today, Curtis Glencross going to the Washington Capitals. Are you surprised that a lot of the shopping has been done before we actually get to Monday?
I'm surprised and I'm not. I think the general experience is, and at least mine was, the earlier you can identify a player to help your team and the earlier you can get him into your team, the better, because there is an integration period when you have a new player coming in, especially at this part of the season, and usually a team bringing a player in is a team that is going to the playoffs. You want to sort of get that integration period out of the way before you get into the playoffs. So I find teams are going more towards the earlier is better model anyway, and I think this year you've seen that it's almost become trade deadline week.
Right. Were there things that really surprised you? And I don't know whether, I think it's fair to say that David Clarkson to Columbus from Toronto for Nathan Horton, 2 teams that aren't going to be in the playoffs, that probably was a shocker. But in terms of teams that were acquiring assets for a playoff run, for possibility of making the playoffs, was there something that jumped out for you? And I'll give you a chance to think about it while I say, for me, I thought Jaromir Jagr, I knew he was going to, or felt he was going to go someplace, thought he might have been a nice fit in Montreal, thought he might have been a nice fit back in Boston, but of course he ends up with the Florida Panthers. Yeah,
that is the one that kind of surprised me the most, not necessarily that he did get traded, but that he got traded to the team that he got traded to in Florida, sort of a team that at the time was traded was on the outside looking in. I was part of 2 management groups that traded Jagr, so I've had the distinction of trading Jaromir Jagr twice.
Yes.
And that's the one I thought that was a little bit surprising for me, both in terms of, to the extent that he controlled where he went or had a say in it, that he would go there.
Do you think that when something like that happens, it's a player that maybe 2 or 3 teams were looking at and might have been a fit for them, when he goes somewhere else, does it up the anxiety, does it up the pressure on other teams then to say, well, okay, if that domino has fallen, we need to jump out in front? Or do you think there is, that it doesn't happen that way, that there isn't a cause and effect when a player goes to a different team?
No, it absolutely does. I mean, you've got... everyone knows who the playoffs teams are, and everyone sort of knows who the rental players available are. And I think you saw that a couple of years ago with Boston when they were trying to get Jarome Iginla at the trade deadline. And they did not. And so they ended up trading for Jaromir Jagr, I think, from Dallas, partly because they didn't get Jarome Iginla and they saw Pittsburgh loading up.
Right. Good. Well, we'll see how it all unfolds. Which dominoes will fall in which direction between now and 3 p.m. Eastern on Monday. As always, we hope you'll stay with ESPN.com for all of your NHL coverage. For Frank Provenzano, I'm Scott Burnside, ESPN.com.